Ever get that feeling at work where the person leading the charge seems, well, maybe less than equipped for the job?
Uh-huh.
Like you're watching something unfold and wondering how they're still holding the controls.
Definitely. I think a lot of people have felt that.
Well, you're not alone. In fact, one of our listeners sent in some really interesting material suggesting there might be a kind of um, darkly humorous law behind it all.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your sources, your curiosity, and really unpack the ideas that stick.
And today, it sounds like we're diving into the cynical but maybe relatable world of the law of Dilbert.
Exactly. The listener's material really highlights this central idea from Scott Adams' Dilbert comic strip.
Right, the one about less competent employees getting promoted?
Yes, promoted specifically into management roles. The idea is it stops them from causing too much trouble in, say, more critical technical positions.
It's quite a thought, isn't it? But it clearly strikes a chord with people.
It really does.
Yeah.
And for you, our listener, especially if you want to get smart on this quickly but, thoroughly,
We're going to cover it all.
yeah, we'll trace where this idea came from, how it stacks up against other management theories, look at some real-life examples.
Geez, that might feel familiar.
Yeah, definitely. And even explore some potential, fixes or antidotes to this whole Dilbert phenomenon.
Sounds good.
Well, let's unpack this. So our listener was basically asking, is my frustrating experience with, let's say, less than stellar management just bad luck? Or could this law of Dilbert actually explain something?
It's a great question to start with. So, going back to the beginning, Scott Adams, he launched Dilbert back in 1989.
Right.
And it wasn't just like random jokes. He drew heavily on his own background as an engineer in the corporate world.
So it came from real experience.
Yeah, absolutely. The humor in Dilbert, I mean, it can be absurd, but it taps into these very real, very common frustrations people have with how offices work.
Okay, and the source material we got lays out the law of Dilbert pretty bluntly. It says, se promueve a los empleados incompetentes a puestos donde no puedan hacer mucho daño, gerencia, which, translates basically to incompetent employees are promoted to positions where they can't do much harm.
Right.
Management
Wow. Yeah, that is direct. Cutting, even.
is.
But, here's where it gets really interesting, especially when you compare it to other ideas about how people move up in companies.
Like the Peter Principle.
Exactly. The source material draws a really smart distinction. Remember, the Peter Principle is the idea that people get promoted until they reach a job they can't do effectively. They rise to their level of incompetence.
Right, you climb until you hit your ceiling.
Yeah. But the law of Dilbert adds this extra layer. It's more cynical, maybe?
How so?
It suggests that sometimes promoting the less capable people isn't just an accident of the system.
Ah, you mean it might be deliberate.
Kind of. Like a deliberate move to sideline them, to keep them away from the really crucial stuff where, their lack of skill could cause real damage.
That idea of intentionality, that feels different, significant even.
It does. It makes you question how companies really value different roles, doesn't it? And what's the logic behind promotions?
If the law of Dilbert holds water, it suggests this, well, maybe misguided logic of just trying to contain incompetence.
Instead of actually dealing with it, resolving it.
Right. So how does this actually look, day to day in the office?
Well, the source material mentions those classic corporate situations we've probably all seen, right? Like leaders making decisions that seem totally disconnected from what's actually happening, or those endless meetings.
Oh, the endless meetings that just drain everyone's time and achieve, well, nothing.
Exactly. Or focusing so much on paperwork and process that the actual substance gets lost.
Yeah, I think we can all picture that.
And what's interesting is how common these examples are. The source also mentions, countless stories from employees, people who've reported to managers who just clearly didn't have the technical skills or even the basic leadership skills needed for the job.
So it's not just a comic strip theory. It resonates. You, our listener, might even be picturing someone right now.
Very possibly. It taps into lived experience for a lot of folks.
I know I've seen things like that, but
Yeah.
is this law of Dilbert just a funny observation? Something to joke about by the water cooler?
Or is there something more to it?
Yeah, does it actually hold up? Is there any, data behind this?
Well, this is where it gets quite sobering. The source material brought up a statistic from a Gallup poll back in 2015.
Right.
It found that a staggering 50%, half of managers in the U.S. were considered ineffective.
50%. Wow.
It's a huge number.
Yeah.
And while it doesn't, definitively prove the law of Dilbert is real.
It certainly suggests ineffective leadership is a massive problem.
Exactly. It lends weight to the idea. This high percentage, maybe it's not just random chance. The law of Dilbert offers a potential systemic reason why this might be happening.
Like a flawed strategy.
Yeah, a strategy of containment, putting people where they seem less harmful in the short term.
But which probably stifles things like innovation and really annoys the competent people long term.
Precisely. It likely does frustrate the high performers.
That 50% figure really sticks with you. So why? Why do we end up with so many ineffective managers? What reasons did our source point to?
It outlined a few key things. One is pretty common, promoting people based on how long they've been their seniority.
Rather than actual skill or leadership potential?
Right. Another is just a reluctance to tackle underperformance head on.
Avoiding difficult conversations.
Okay.
Or firing people.
Yeah, that hesitation, it can lead to just shuffling less effective people into roles seen as less critical, which often means management.
Easier to move them sideways or upwards than address the root issue.
It can seem that way. And finally, there's the workplace culture itself. Sometimes it feels like the appearance of being busy. Lots of meetings, reports.
Is valued more than actual tangible results.
Exactly. That focus on optics over output.
All of those points, they really hit home, don't they? It's almost like it's easier to put someone in management where maybe their technical gaps aren't as immediately obvious.
And to confront the performance issue directly. Yeah.
So, okay, if this law of Dilbert has some real basis, if it reflects actual organizational behavior, are we doomed? Or are there ways to fight back?
Can we stop our workplaces from becoming, Dilbert comics?
Right. Are there solutions?
Absolutely. And this is where we get more constructive. The source proposes several really important solutions.
Good. Like what?
First, a much better evaluation of actual skills and competencies before promoting someone, not just how long they've worked there or what they did in a totally different role.
Do they actually have the skills needed for the next level, especially leadership skills?
That's the key question. It sounds like common sense, but clearly.
It doesn't always happen. Being a great engineer doesn't automatically make you a great team lead.
Exactly. So that evaluation piece is critical.
Okay, what else?
Another big one is implementing proper leadership training and development.
Actually teaching people how to manage.
Yes. Equipping them with skills in communication, delegation, strategic thinking, giving useful feedback. That can make a huge difference.
Makes sense. Invest in the people you put in charge.
And one more thing, fostering a culture where feedback is constant and valued, like using regular 360-degree reviews.
So people get input from their team, their peers, not just their own boss.
Right. It gives a much rounder picture of someone's strengths and, importantly, where they need to develop.
Okay, so let's try and bring it all together then. It seems like the law of Dilbert, even though it comes from satire.
It does shine a light on some very real issues in how companies manage people and, crucially, who gets promoted.
And we need to remember that key difference from the Peter Principle.
Right, that element of potential intentionality.
The idea that maybe these promotions aren't always just mistakes. That's the really provocative part.
It is. But you asked earlier, doesn't the Peter Principle also lead to incompetence in management? How does the intentionality of Dilbert's law really change things?
Yeah. What's the practical difference?
That's a really sharp question. So the Peter Principle is like an endpoint reached almost by default. You arrive, you hit your limit, boom, incompetence.
Okay.
Dilbert's law suggests something more active, even if it's a flawed strategy. It's saying, we know this person isn't great technically. Let's put them over here in management to limit the blast radius.
So it's about actively trying to contain their impact elsewhere.
Exactly. And that active choice, that intentionality, can create a really cynical culture. It signals that competence in key technical areas might not be the path to leadership.
Which could definitely demotivate your best technical people.
Absolutely. It can reinforce that feeling that the system prioritizes containing weakness over actually building on strength, especially in those crucial non-management roles.
Got it. That makes the distinction much clearer and maybe more worrying.
It can be.
And those solutions, the source mentioned, focusing on real skills, investing in training, getting feedback, they feel vital for building workplaces that are not just more effective, but, fairer too.
It's not just about dodging bad managers. It's about creating an environment where talent actually thrives. everywhere.
Well said.
And, our source leaves us with this final, rather pointed thought. It was originally in Spanish. Si tu jefe parece salido de un cómic de Dilbert, quizá la ley ya opera en tu oficina.
Which means?
If your boss seems like they walked straight out of a Dilbert comic, maybe the law is already in effect in your office.
Oof. That's a bit close to home, potentially.
Pretty thought-provoking, isn't it? It's almost more disheartening to think it might not just be simple incompetence, but maybe a deliberate, if misguided, strategy.
Yeah. What kind of toll does that take on morale? On the motivation of the people who are capable?
That's the question, isn't it?
It really is. And it leaves you, our listener, with something pretty significant to think about.
Yeah.
What are the wider impacts of these dynamics on a company's success? Its innovation.
And maybe just as important, on the day-to-day experience and the spirit of the people working there.
Definitely food for thought as you navigate your own work life.